club. I see a lot of new people and new faces, which I'm super excited about, so that's really great. I'm Nicole Williams, I'm the president of the club, and so just want to welcome you for braving the rain. And I apologize for the hat. I got caught in the rain earlier today, so I just kind of threw this Orioles hat. I look a mess, but I apologize in advance. So as we all brave the weather and ventured out today for our main meeting for our annual legislative update. So usually we always start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, and so if we can all stand. And back to want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may see Ryan walking around. I think he's videotaping, Facebook Living our meeting. We do have a Facebook page, so if you haven't checked out our Facebook page, make sure you do, and make sure you like our page.
We're also working on a YouTube.
And we're working on the YouTube. Okay. Next, it's been a while. I don't know minutes. We don't have any minutes just quite yet. But we do have our treasurer here, and I don't know if our treasurer has a financial report.
We have 350214 in the bank and no bills. We're doing fine.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, and so that's our treasurer's report. And so next, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Conrad Hurling, who is our executive vice president, and he is going to take it from here for me.
The torch has been passed to a new generation. Well, make that an older generation. The next portion of our meeting is something that happens every year, where we get a recount. We get a sense of what happened, why it perhaps happened, and what bills got through, what bills didn't get through. One of the things in my quick research about this, a lot of people don't realize in, 3 months roughly, that there are over 3,000 bills that are proposed, and in this session, 889 were adopted. I'm not sure how many were enacted. Just a real quick summary, and of course our delegates and state senator will go into far greater detail. But this has been a really tough day, because once again, we have kids in the school outside of Galveston, Texas, who were shot and were killed. And it does make me think, and probably everybody here makes us think, why Congress hasn't passed common sense gun control legislation. But on a state level, our delegation helped get passed legislation that bans bump stocks and other rapid-fire weapons. Other legislation passed regarding sick leave, how and when schools should be built, automatic voter registration, and free tuition, yay, for junior college students. So, now to tell us more about these bills and more, Senator Paul Pinsky, Delegate Joanna Gaines, Delegate Ann Healy, and Delegate Alonzo Washington. The mic is now turned on. Over to you.
Thank you, Conrad. Thank you all, and thank you for coming out tonight. This is why we do what we do, because there are people like you who care and are involved and interested. We can push issues, but we don't do it for ourselves. When we turn around and see people who are committed, who believe in decency and social justice and fairness, as you do, that's what sort of propels us forward. I want to touch on 3 or 4 quick issues and pass it on to my colleagues in the House. As Conrad said, one of the pieces of legislation which I happen to work on and feel fairly proud about was the community college bill. A lot of students who want to go to community college either for an AA degree or for job training, when they're done, the first thing they have to do before they get their careers started is to pay off debt. $4,000, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000. They're already in the hole before they started on their life's journey. We think that's wrong. It's been talked about on the national level. We've pursued this for a couple of years on the state level. Actually, a couple of local jurisdictions have worked on it even previously. Garrett County was one of the first. Small Garrett County, Western Maryland, made community college for their students free, and they paid for it. Well, we didn't think it should fall on each county across the state or Baltimore City. So for the last 2 years, we worked on a bill to make sure that children of working and middle-income families would not have that debt and facing that debt. You know, if you are under very challenging and difficult circumstances, there is state aid. So there are some students who are fortunate, and fortunately unfortunate, because of their circumstances, that they can get financial aid from the state or the federal government to pay for their tuition. But there's some who are a little higher on the economic situation or who don't. So we passed legislation this year that said if you are the son or daughter of a family who makes $150,000 or less, or a single parent who makes less than $100,000, and you go within 2 years of graduation, and you go full-time and maintain a grade point average, community college would be free. We put $15 million to this fund. Now, we're not exactly sure it's going to cover everybody in the state, but we think it's going to cover these 4,000 or 5,000 people. Yeah, absolutely. But we didn't stop there. There are some people who don't want to get an AA degree. They want to become an LPN or learn a skill or a trade or a craft. So we also included in the bill anybody of any age who wants to go to get job certification at a community college are also eligible for this free tuition. So it's, when we say working in middle-income families, that's exactly what we mean. You know, there are 5 or 6 states that have done it in some way, shape, or form, but we've crafted a bill to try to take care of these people so they don't have that debt. And you know, all the employers across the state are saying we want people who are better trained, better educated, so it fits their need as well. So we want to reduce debt, improve our workforce, and we think we're on the steps of doing that. Another piece of the bill, also, for many people who went to college, 2-year, 4-year college years ago, and they went for a year or 2 years, and they were this close to getting their aid to be at a community college, or they were 4-year college and went for a year, 2 year, 3 years, and then life got in the way. Job, family, children, and they had to drop out. We call them near completers. People are this close. But getting that degree can make a big difference in your income. So we also have an aspect of the bill that sets a one-stop shop for people who are near completers to either call or go to a website to match them up with a college nearby, because they might have been born in Garrett County, Western Maryland, but now they're in Charles County. Or they grew up in Baltimore City and might have gone to Morgan State University, but now they live in Montgomery County or Allegheny County. So rather than have it siloed, we want to have it unified, so everybody is helping everyone else, and to have staff, people, website that can match them up, and also give some incentive to pay for those last few credits they need. So we're all pretty excited. Everyone's worked on it in some way, shape, or form. I know on the national level, U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders has been calling for this, but we've been fighting for it, and so we're bold and proud, and these folks help do that. 2 other quick items, and then I'll pass on. We've talked about the environment for many years. A lot of you are doing things about it. Greenbelt's doing things about it. We're trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, our footprint, and we've passed legislation, which I've talked about in the past, of requiring the state of Maryland to reduce its greenhouse gas reduction by 40% by 2030, which is still not enough, but we're one of the leading states. But besides mitigating that problem, we're also going to have to adapt to that problem, because something's going to happen no matter what we do at this point. I mean, sea level is rising and it will rise, although marginally, every 10, 20, 30 years it increases. But climate change also brings more severe storms and storm surges. We saw what happened in Houston last week. I mean, half the city was flooded. There is an agency in the state that has responsibility for deciding where you can site state buildings, where you can place them. And since we're paying for them with our tax money, it would be pure folly to build a school or a state building where 20 years from now, it's going to be underwater 40 days of the year. This group called the Coastline Council, they've been taking into consideration sea level rise, and they're expecting it to be 2 feet by the end of the century. But they haven't been taking into account what's called storm surge. As storms get worse and hurricanes get worse, and we have scientists in the room, you have to take into account not one or the other, but both. I mean, we don't want to have what happened in Houston or Sandy happen in our state. And Maryland is one of the 4 worst, most vulnerable states in the country. Louisiana, not surprising, Florida, ourselves, and maybe, I'm not sure if it's New Jersey, I don't know who the 4th is, or one of the Carolinas. But given the bay and our coastal area, and inland flooding in our harbor, Annapolis, and also, by the way, the more the sea level rise and salt water gets into the ground, it affects agriculture and farming. It kills crops. So this has many implications. So we passed a bill this year to the legislature, which I sponsored, that says this Coastline Council has to take into consideration in citing buildings that built with public money, schools, state buildings, etc., sea level rise and storm surge. And also to require every jurisdiction in the state to come up with a plan for what's called nuisance flooding. And that's not even what we're talking about the last few days with the flooding. But what Annapolis sees dozens of times a year, that Inner Harbor sees. So that's another thing that we're all proud of as well. I'm going to leave pay sick leave to my colleagues, taxes. I did introduce healthcare for all legislation again, which is probably the 15th to 20th time I've done it. I think we should have Medicare for all. Healthcare, as I said before, should be a right, not a privilege. We shouldn't have to beg each year. Obamacare was an important step forward, but there are much more efficient, smarter ways to do it. I don't think healthcare should be in the private sector. Medicare works. We could probably be tweaked and improved, but why shouldn't we do that for everyone? With one system, one form, where doctors' offices don't have 10 support staff filling out 15 insurance forms for everybody else. You have one. It makes a lot of sense. You insure everyone. We have quality of care. You can select your own provider, your own doctor, and you still have to move in that direction. So I'm going to keep fighting that fight. Finally, this is not legislation, but it's important just the same. 2 years ago, the legislature embarked on a plan to reform schools across the state. And a commission was formed called the Kerwin Commission. And the delegate of Washington serves on that. 25 people with blue ribbon, 2 members of the State Board of Education. It's being chaired by the former president of the University of Maryland, Rick Kerwin, a great man who I really appreciate, and I'm in the bag for it, a really good guy. It's made up of legislators, council members, experts in many fields. And the goal and the charge of the committee was twofold. One, to come up with a formula for state funding to get more money to the 24 jurisdictions, including Maryland and Prince George. But it had a second charge. It wasn't just to raise more money. The second charge was to make Maryland schools world class. They aren't. They're uneven across the state. They're uneven within Prince George's County. There are some schools that work very well, and there's some that are a mess. We had some consultants who looked around the world. What are the countries that have the best results? And they benchmarked those 3 or 4 that have actually turned around their system over 5, 10, or 15 years. Then they benchmarked the states that have the best results. And while we have some decent and good schools, we are not among the top 2 or 3 with results. So the plan was to also come up with recommendations for how we can transform our schools to be world class. And it means some big changes. We thought we could do it in a year, we didn't complete it in a year. So it got extended. We meet a couple times a month, all day long. People take off from their jobs. And we have to have a report next late fall or winter to the legislature to come up with new proposals for how schools should be working that are based on proven practices, not imposed for dreams, proven practices, and then also recommend the necessary money to pay for it. And one of the things, not to go on too long, is in many countries, teachers are regarded like architects and engineers. That's not the case in the United States. They're paid comparable to architects and engineers. It's difficult to get into colleges that specialize in education. Now, around the country, they're closing schools of education because not enough people are going into the field. Well, in some countries, they actually have a waiting list, and you need a 4.0 to get in. The salary is better, the professionalism on the job is better, there's collaboration, but it really means transforming and changing the whole paradigm in this country. It's not going to happen overnight. We have to do a lot of things. We have to find out why we're failing some students, what kind of supports we have to put in place, particularly working toward minority communities, all workers towards being two of them. So that's an ongoing effort. We spend a lot of time, not during the legislature, but meeting to come up with a report that hopefully, with your children, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, we can really have some of the best schools in the country and the nation. So there's some things I've been working on. I appreciate all of your support, and I want to hand it off to Delegate James.
Thank you so very much, Senator. As you probably remember, I serve on the Appropriations Committee. So most of my focus was on things that were in the budget. I would use something else this time wasn't in the budget. We figured out a way to fully fund what the governor had put in the budget for the local jurisdictions getting revenue for their roads. And we did that through a bill which will give the local jurisdictions 5 years. And after that, we'll figure out next year or the year after how we're going to make it more permanent. You probably remember that we modified the formulas, I think in 08 or 09. And the municipalities and the counties have been struggling just to maintain their roads. And they've been very diligent in their one focus, and that's getting those funds restored. And I think we're on the right pathway now. As I said, I do serve on the Appropriations Committee, and the other thing I did was to put in budget language to monitor what they're going to do with the maglev if it comes, and anything on 295. I had budget language telling the governor to create an ombuds office so that we, citizens, will have someone to answer our questions. Right now, every time you ask a question about the maglev, they simply say it's not ours, it's a private road, it's a private transit system. But someone has to answer. If they're using the state's asset, state land, my belief is that the state is going to have to come up with some kind of response to the citizens. They consistently say that there's not going to be any state revenue going into it. I never believe that. My eyes on it, I would watch it, and it would have to go through my subcommittee if that ever happens, and I don't believe that's going to happen. I've already convinced all the members that are currently on that subcommittee that that's something we really don't want right now. The other thing the governor did in his budget proposal was to cut out $29 million for the Prince George's County Hospital. Last year, we had a bill that fully funded the hospital. I think it gave it $100 million for the next 10 years, and he took out $29 million for the construction of the hospital. We put that right back in. It was a very interesting session.
going to let my colleagues tell you a little bit more of some of the other things that we do.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Delegate Ian Healy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a few other things. I was very interested that Senator Pinsky talked about the Kirwan Commission, because it highlights that we do have a 90-day session, but that's not all we do. In the interim, we all work on other things as well. Sometimes it's committee work. We take what they call site visits, or sometimes it's being on a commission, Blue Ribbon Commission or a task force that's studying an important issue. I was on one of those not too long ago, having to do with shielding the identity of property owners, victims of domestic violence, human trafficking, were afraid to buy a home because the stalker, the person that was after them, could find out where they lived. So there was a task force formed, and it met during the interim, and we studied, again, what was done in other states, came up with a model from the state of Minnesota where it had been working successfully, and adapted it to Maryland's unique situations. And I, as a member of that task force, introduced the bill which passed and was signed by the governor this year to provide a mechanism where the person who has their record shielded can still do business through the Secretary of State's office. So if you go to the land records, you'll find it, and you look up that property, you'll see a piece of paper or a reference that says that this is shielded, and that you should contact the Secretary of State's office to get in touch with the owner of that property, so that you'll never know who that person is. And it takes the cooperation of the clerks of the court. We have to make sure that the taxes got paid in the right counties. There are a lot of complexities that were worked out. And that's pretty typical of how we do business outside of the 90-day session. So we don't work just 90 days. This past session was particularly productive in a lot of ways. The first thing we did when we got there was we overrode the veto of Governor Hogan. Last year, he vetoed what was last year's House Bill 1, which was the paid sick leave bill, where everyone in the state who works in a company that has 15 or more employees, and it also protects the jobs of people in the even smaller companies. They don't get paid sick leave, but they won't get fired. So if they get sick. So we took care of that. We overrode that veto. That was the first order of business. The first order of business for the new session was House Bill 1, Senate Bill 2, which was doing away with the parental rights of rapists. And you would think that this would not be a hard thing to do, but over the years, the legislature has struggled with this. And this year, we finally passed it, and it makes sure that you can use a standard of clear and convincing evidence, which is a legal standard. I think that the lawyers in the room would probably be able to explain a little better. But it's not as high a standard as a criminal thing, like beyond reasonable doubt. But it's a pretty high standard, so that if it's met, then they can terminate the parental rights of the parent who conceived a child through violence. So those are a couple of big things that we started out with. Throughout the course of the session, we dealt with a lot of issues. School safety was a big one. That's the issue we're talking about today on the news. I'm sorry.
No, I think the microphone died. Yeah, it needs to be back.
Oh, it's not me.
Which is why we have these spirit batteries.
I can talk louder. I didn't know I needed to. I will. He knows. Yes. Where was I? Today's news, yeah, about the school shooting. While we were in Annapolis this past session, in March, there was a school shooting in Southern Maryland. Right at the same time we were considering all of these things. And we actually passed legislation, a lot of it, several pieces of legislation dealing with that. We banned phone stops. We provided more money for the safety of the schools to make the school, and the schools are being designed safer now. I was just at a meeting on William Wirt, the new William Wirt School, and the architects were talking to the community. They're building in places within the school so that you can block off whole sections of the school, so that somebody coming in doesn't just report to the office. They can't get anywhere else until they do. Physically, there are barriers that can be built on the newly designed schools. So we're doing these kind of things, and I know that Alonzo works on the committee that deals with education, so I'm not going to get into that too much. I'm on the Environment and Transportation Committee. Some of the things that we did, I want to talk about the highway user. There's also a whole lot of things that we did with regard to a bill that, for instance, a bill that I did, it's called a move over bill. When you come upon a police car, you know you're supposed to slow down and move over, so that so you give the safety for the police that are taking care of somebody. We extended that to include all kinds of service trucks, like tow trucks and trash trucks. Anybody that's got the yellow lights, the amber lights, if that's on the side of the road, again, you'll need to slow down, move over when you come upon those, so that the people that are doing the work on the side of the road are kept safe. It's been a big issue with safety with the highways. I also did a bill on these privately owned transportation projects that Delegate Gates was talking about. The bill that I put in originally was dealt with eminent domain, but it was changed just to require that there always be, no matter what, some kind of environmental study done before they can go forward. Because the Hyperloop, which is another proposal, other than MAGA, is another proposal that actually was going forward with absolutely no environmental studies. So this bill was adapted to make sure that environmental studies are done no matter what. If you're going to be doing these tunnels and stuff that they're talking about. So we've got a lot of things like that. I could go on for a while, but I want to give my colleague this opportunity as well. Then we'll answer questions.
I was going to say, take your time. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right, here we go. All right, so I'm Alonzo Washington. I'm one of your state delegates, and it's been a pleasure to serving you for just such a short period of time of only about 5 years, six legislative sessions, and since then, I've sponsored and successfully passed over 30 pieces of legislation in the State House and in the Senate, and the governor signed them all, or even allowed them to go through, maybe. I didn't get one veto, so I haven't had that honor yet, but one day. So this year, let's talk about that a little bit. First I want to thank you all also for those of you who attended my school safety and gun control event that I had, the table talk that I had. I think we had a very great conversation, even with our young people, about what can we do to make our schools more safe and productive for them. I visited Roosevelt High School probably a week before we had our event, and they had a similar event about a day of solutions, and it was very telling about how they feel about their school safety at Roosevelt High School right here in Greenbelt. And if you can see, I posted it on Facebook, some of the responses they had. Obviously, just like us, they don't want teachers with guns. They think that's ridiculous and stupid. They do want to make sure that some of them, it's crazy because some of them want more police officers in their schools, some don't want more police officers in their schools. There was the majority of them felt safe there, but did not feel safe about the drills that they had to go through. So those are some of the things that we also have to take into account when we pass legislation about how do our children feel about where they are, because they're the ones in these classrooms. They're the ones that are encountering these incidents that happen day in and day out. So we're proud to pass a piece of legislation that comprehensively will keep our kids safe by ensuring that there's the SROs. Anybody here know what SROs are? the student resource officers. They're the police officer with the gun in front of our school, in front of our kids, in the front of the school. And their job right now is to protect our school students. Unfortunately, they didn't have training to work with our kids. These are police officers that are trained like any other police officer is trained, but they're not trained specifically to work with our kids. They're not trained on racial bias techniques. They're not trained on de-escalation training many times. So we put that in the bill to ensure that they are being trained on these types of things in our school system. School system wide. In Prince George's County, we have every high school, which I think we have about 27 of them, they all have a school resource officer. But they also have these other folks that are the school security personnel who also interact with our kids. This bill would ensure that they also receive this type of training to ensure that there's training across the board and they're treating our kids, not that there's some, some kids might get a little bit out there, but there's most kids that don't. And we want them to be able to have a welcoming environment in our school, and I think that's something important that we needed to pass. And I've been asking for years to get this done, and every time I've asked, it's been declined. And not until the incident that occurred way too late earlier this year that happened in Florida, and also that happened here in Maryland, did they finally decide that, oh, let's take this seriously now. And I'm happy that they did, but we're too reactive in this legislature. We're way too reactive, and we're not proactive about getting the issues done that affect our kids and our minority kids, especially. It's always too late when they feel like they need to step up to the plate. As many of you know, I am the election law chair in the House, so I have the responsibility of digesting many of the laws that come in front of us that deal with our elections and our campaign finance system. This year, what you see on the news all the time was the Russia investigation. Anybody heard about that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that thing there, where it was like these Russian ads and these ad bots out there, that's happening. That was happening in 2016. It was happening for a very long time. When Congress did not act on this, Maryland did. I actually sponsored a bill that would hold Facebook, these social media platforms, these online platforms accountable for any outside or any foreign influence entity that tries to influence our elections in the state of Maryland. And I believe that's extremely important because we have an election coming up right now, and they can start influencing our elections right now. The governor did not decide to sign this bill, but hopefully in the next couple of days he doesn't veto it. Although I will enjoy that honor as well, but he'll put our elections at jeopardy if he does decide to veto that bill. But it's the first in the nation and the first of its kind, and it actually made national news. We were on the AP News for this bill particularly, and it's a big step in the right direction for the state of Maryland, and hopefully I think there's other states that are using this bill that I sponsored as a model for their states too. But we're waiting for Congress because that's when we really need to step our game up. The two things that you'll see on the ballot this year in the general election in November. One is the lockbox legislation to keep education funding. Remember the casinos, and they were on the news talking about how it's gonna go towards education, it's gonna go towards education. Well, many people lie to you. It doesn't always go to education. It goes to other places. And what this thing does now is says that all the money from the casino that's slated to go to education will now be in this lockbox. So we need you all to vote for that so we can actually increase funding for our education system finally, and make sure that money goes to our kids and not to filling out gaps in our budget. And also that's part of the plan for our Kerwin Commission. Senator Pinsky mentioned that a little bit earlier. We both sit on that commission, and hopefully that'll be able to pay for some of the programs and some of the things that we want to do, like increasing teacher salary, so they're on the same page, they're being paid the same as our engineers and our architects, ensuring that there's community schools where we have wraparound services for our low-income students and our at-risk youth and our families that need social services, and we have these wraparound services in one location for them because we have a 65% rate of poverty in our school system. Now, we don't react to that, or we don't proactively make sure that we're taking care of our young people, we're going to keep on being number 2 at the bottom of the state schools in Prince George's County, and throughout the state of Maryland too. It's a really important and really big issue. I do want to talk a little bit about affordable housing. I know I'm going over my time, but Senator Pinsky was talking for at least about 20 minutes or so. So affordable housing, a lot of our seniors are being priced out of our communities and our neighborhoods. A bill that I passed in Glendale, they're looking to build senior housing over there, and that's the old historic Glendale site. And what they want to do is use historic tax credits to keep the buildings that are there, not necessarily tear them down. So what I did was introduce a bill that would incentivize this, that would allow a certain percentage of that tax credit to be used for affordable housing buildings. And they're interested in using that for that area and for that community. We just had a meeting about last week or so about the Glendale Hospital site, and a lot of folks feel like it's a big financial gap that they have there that they have to fill. It looks like we're hopeful that they're able to do it and fill that gap, but folks feel like they'll be priced out even if they do fill the gap. So hopefully this bill would help them in the sense of ensuring that there's affordable housing there. I was recently, just yesterday, given an award from the Maryland Preservation Society just for this bill, so I was honored to have that honor from them. The last thing I'll mention, because I know that folks want to ask questions, is this free tuition for a community college. I think for years you guys know me by now that I've been talking about this issue because it's very dear to my heart in the sense of the background that I've had and where I've come from, and that college changed my life. And all I wanted to do was make sure that young people that grew up just like me and look like me, or who have similar circumstances, are able to have that opportunity that I have for college access. Because it changed my life. It changed my life in a different direction, and it took me from a poverty and homelessness to being where I am today and actually owning my first home in Greenbelt now. And so we need to make sure that opportunities like this are available to our young people so that they have an opportunity to go to college. We started it in Prince George's County. There was 4 other jurisdictions in the state of Maryland that did it. There was 150 other jurisdictions in the country that did it. We were the 5th in the state to do it, and then a year later, Baltimore City decided to do it. And now we're finally glad that the state of Maryland has finally come along and being reactive and finally making free tuition for community college as well. So it's a huge thing. I'm glad that we led the efforts on that, and we actually got that done finally here in the state of Maryland. And the last thing I want to mention on your ballot, on the ballot also, there's going to be this thing called same-day voter registration, where you actually get to walk in and vote on the same day and don't have to wait or use your voter registration and send it in early. 14 other jurisdictions, including DC, actually does it now. Republican, blue states and red states do this, and so it doesn't make sense that while we can't do it, but you actually can register to vote right now during early voting. We're just making it similar to what we're doing on election day. And we did make automatic voter registration as well. So thank you very much, and we're open to any questions from anyone. Thank you, Conrad.
Please go ahead and ask that. If you have a question, let's limit it to one question so that as many people as possible can ask a question. And then by the time it's 11 o'clock, if you have you're staying until 11. Right? Yes. All right, first, Bill.
I have one question and one statement.
Okay, can we do that in less than 2 minutes?
Yes. Some people may know that I believe all folks should be challenged all the time, but especially when they may be running for re-election. We in the 22nd Legislative District are blessed to have a contest this year. It had been my hope that coalition of progressive Greenbelt organizations was put on the City Council forum last October, would similarly plan for a delegates forum in the next month. And I don't understand that, but the energy for that may not be in existence. may not exist. So I'm hopeful that we, the Roosevelt Democratic Club, can schedule a forum between now and the 26th, where there used to be 5 folks, and those 2 other 5 folks, can come and answer questions specifically about whether or not they should either be reelected or someone should be elected to replace one of them.
Okay, that's your comment. What's your question?
I only learned last Saturday that this past session there were 2 bills to kind of control or improve or democratize the awareness of the public with regard to actions of the PSC. I had occasion to inquire earlier this week, and I know there's some enthusiasm for the General Assembly doing this. I'd like to know from all 4 of you whether you plan on doing that this next session. And very quickly, since Alonzo, I learned tonight, is chairing the Election Law and Finance Committee, I would hope that effort would begin now for January, should he be reelected, that in January, a bill to enact statewide a small donor public financing provision could be enacted and passed.
Thank you.
And signed. Thank you.
Want to share the mic?
Well, answering the second question first, in the Senate, I was the prime sponsor of public financing, small donor contributions to have the system voluntarily where if people don't want to go and seek money from private individuals with deep pockets, they could pull from a public fund and limit how much they spend and be beholden to the public taxpayers rather than individual contributors. So it didn't go anywhere, and it's a continuous battle. Montgomery County has instituted this year, Howard County is planning to, and it's on the agenda in Prince George's County. So the more momentum on that, the better. I'm a big fan. In terms of the PSC is a public service commission. They oversee utilities in the state and regulatory actions. I have to be honest, as Conrad said, we get about 3,000 bills, and many of them are introduced and then get lost in committee or killed in committee or stay in committee. So I don't remember any of those getting to the floor, and I'm just going to have to familiarize myself with those 2 bills that you said that Congress guides as a process. I and my staff try to keep abreast of everything they do because we want to make sure our utility commission serves the public and clean energy and regulating some of the big behemoths who are making large profits.
I believe a bill for the Public Service Commission would go through economic matters, and I don't think any of us currently serve on economic matters. I think we had a conversation about you at least approaching the chair of economic matters, who's Derek Davis, who lives right here in Prince George's County. He's usually open to different ideas, so I don't know, I didn't see the bill, I guess it was in economic matters.
Who is that person?
Derek Davis, he's the chair of economic matters.
I also have long supported public financing and co-sponsored the Cross Falls bills for many years. I think, and I'm listening to Alonzo, I mean, he's been, you can tell, a little bit frustrated. It takes longer than it should to get some progressive things done in the legislature. And we've been through this for many years. And it does take long. You have to persuade people from all over the state, who come from all walks of life, and have completely different value systems. And you have to find a majority in both houses to agree on the exact language to do something. It's not as easy as it looks.
Oh, I see.
And it is frustrating over the years. I had one bill I put in every year for about 12, 15 years. It was a tax reform bill. When I was on Ways and Means, I was the vice chair, and I could get it out of the House. I could never get it out of the Senate until one year there was a big crisis, and they were looking at every possible kind of reform to do. And it got into the mix, fine. But I thought it was something that should have been done years and years ago. And so that's kind of the dynamic of it. With the Public Service Commission, that we do have a strong committee system, and we do tend to rely on the committees to vet those bills. But being said, if there's an issue that constituents are particularly concerned about, we will, proactively go and look for them and try to find out more about it. And, but we do have to be reminded if it's not in our committee, because committee work takes up an awful lot of our time.
I'm going to be brief. I want to thank Delegate Haley for teaching me the legislative process just now. Thanks for that.
Well, not for you, but
but it's less frustration, more of we're Democrats. We're Democrats here, right? Everybody's a Democrat, right? And when you tell a Democrat that our kids are hurting and that this situation is hurting, we're sending kids, the school to prison pipeline is real, and here's the evidence-based solution for it. We shouldn't have to convince Democrats that this is the way we help our kids if it's something that's been proven and has been done. And so it's less about learning the legislative process and how it works. I get that. I understand that. My passion comes from these young people who I've seen time and time again get suspended and then also get back and go into the prison, and then they get lost. And there's no way to find them after that. So that's the frustration. That's the frustration part. The legislative process isn't frustrating me. It's the fact that I know that our people are out there hurting. I think Bill knows with the PSC. I passed a bill with the PSC this year to actually ensure that they do a study to help some of our condo associations find funding, because some of them are being closed down because of their utility bills. And we would need to find out how can we help them in changing their utilities from master meters to single meter, and so that they can stave off their foreclosures or some of the things that they're doing. As far as the bill, I don't know what bills those are, just similar to my colleagues. However, I'm all for accountability and transparency. I had a bill that would institute an inspector general for our school system. It passed the Senate, it passed the House. Unfortunately, the Senate is where a lot of great bills die. And so that's where the bill went, and that's where it died. And so I'm all for transparency and accountability. And I look forward to supporting those bills. And you asked about the last piece, which was I'll support public financing too. I mean, not against that. So.
Do any of you care to address his comment? If there were to be a forum, I take it that you all participate in that as well? Oh, yeah. And on the theme of hurting, it's 50 years since Robert Kennedy was killed. And that was maybe one of the themes of what he was trying to get across. I appreciate your response as well.
My concern, delegates, my concern is 45. I don't even say it's 50, but he's really been pushing that the extra stuff. He was just doing extra military stuff that they have to give it all to our local police. I am so. I already did a petition once a while ago saying we do not want this stuff in Greenville. This is. We are not the military. We are not the enemy. And so we don't want the stuff that's been used for the military, this excess stuff. I hope that Greenbelt doesn't take any of this extra military equipment that 45 is so kindly giving to the local police. I also don't like this pipeline from, okay, you're a soldier, now you can be a police officer. Well, excuse me, if you were really on the front lines, you're the enemy. But that's very different than being a police officer where you're my friend. And I just hope that that attitude about also hiring people from the military who have not gone through some kind of training explaining that the police are not like the military. They're supposed to be helping us. We're not the enemy. And I hope we don't take any of this free excess military equipment, because that's not what our police are for.
Okay.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
No, we don't go. It's okay.
What's that?
I can talk.
You should get them have the.
I have a question.
Okay.
For you.
Project so we can pick it up what you're saying.
Okay. So I work for education.
Read your comment.
like success, they're human beings. Look at them as a person, not as a number, not as a grade. Because sometimes when I talk to the students, see, you are not smart, you are not dumb, you are a person. A grade, it doesn't make you better or worse. It's just a system, and it's a student. Because sometimes they blow them, they play them. So just try to talk with the teachers, try to talk with the students, try to talk with the parents. Please.
Thank you. Yeah. First of all, I taught 20 years in Prince George's County Schools, Central High School, Fairmont Heights High School, High Point High School, U.S. history, world history. So I have many friends who are teachers. I've spent another 20 years in schools. Teachers, students, administrators all need greater supports. As you know, many teachers are in front of students 80% of the day, 7 out of 8 classes, 6 out of 7 classes, and it's exhausting. One of the things we've learned in many other countries, teachers are only doing direct instruction 40 or 50% of the school day, and they're spending other time with colleagues, reflecting on what students are learning, which aren't, and what they should do differently in their instruction. They're spending time looking at data. They're also able to spend more time making personal relations with students and their families. When you're teaching 7 periods a day or 6 periods a day and running like a crazy person across the school, it's very challenging. And as Dr. Washington talked about, there's a big move afoot, and it's totally appropriate to not put school here and put health supports and social supports and family supports over here. That they should be connected. That a school setting, there should be health care, there should be counseling. There should be more social workers. And I'm going to go back to this bill in Annapolis, and I want to explain nuance. This bill to deal with school safety, it set a lot of policy, and at the end of the day, they added $10 million to help counties across the state hire more police officers to respond to incidents. To those counties that didn't have people in the schools, the state of Maryland is going to send more money to them so they can have more people available to respond. It's a complicated issue, and I have to tell you, at the end of the day, I was the only state senator who voted against that bill, because $10 million wasn't put to social workers to deal with people who are conflicted or challenged, who have emotional problems. It was responded. Now, were there other good parts of the bill? Yeah, there were. But one of the things we have to do every day in front of 1,000, 1,500 bills is balance. What's most important? Yes, it required certain things in protecting schools and safety. Yet it also had money for response, but not for preventive action. On balance, is it a good bill or a bad bill? Everyone makes their choices. So it's a two-part answer. We're dealing with many nuanced pieces of legislation that aren't all perfect, because we have to get a majority to pass it, as we talked about before. But I think in terms of schools, I think I'm in school throughout the year. I have about 40 plus years of education. I travel around the country trying to assist schools and states. We have a big challenge. It's not easy. Our school board has been under controversy. With that, we can spend a whole evening talking about that. We have to improve the things that need improving and maintain the things that are working. But I would say this: teachers are working hard, students are working hard. But I think there's a lot of room for improvement with the right supports, where our students can succeed. They can learn even more. I mean, we have students in this county, and in Northwestern, and Roosevelt, and in Oxon Hill, and Potomac. Some who are coming out of schools with B's and C's. But they're not college and career ready. They think they are, but they aren't. We have to raise our standards, because I think students can learn, but we also have to give them the supports to help them. And it's not an easy turnaround task, and if I applied that earlier, it's not. And I think a lot of the solutions will in fact come from students and parents. That's a long answer to your short question.
Ryan, you have a question, then
Yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah. All right. For people on YouTube, this is me talking. So you don't see me, that's okay. All right. My question is there any way for once the House brings to the floor that the President of the Senate or the Speaker of the House cannot kill the bill on the floor, that he actually has to bring it to a vote? He does, and give him the power to prioritize the votes. Similarly, they do this in Nebraska, and I thought it was a very interesting idea. Do I need to clarify what I'm saying? Oh.
More, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll take the first stab at it. The presiding officers control the flow of the work that's brought to them. In the time that I've been a legislator, I only remember maybe 1 or 2 bills absolutely dying on the floor. I think we had one this past session. It was kind of funny.
No, it's
We didn't expect it to die. I mean, I don't think the presiding officer expected it to die, but he did. But they control the flow of the work. And the work is also controlled in the committee. So usually it's vetted within the committee, as Delegate Healy said. And if they can convince the members of, the 23 members of that committee that it's a good bill, that it's been tweaked enough, then they'll pass it on. I'll let Delegate Healy take a stab at it now.
Yeah, it's, this year we had 3,100, actually in excess of 3,100 bills to deal with in 90 days. And it's just impossible to do that unless you divide the work up and you get it, have people working on it simultaneously. I've called the legislature kind of a 10-ring circus, because we've got 6 standing committees in the House and 4 in the Senate, all working simultaneously. And it's a wonder that we get much done at all, but we do. And part of it is because we have a system, and it's not perfect, but it does work with the limitations that we have as far as time is concerned. We don't limit the number of bills that people can put in. Anybody can put in any number of bills they want to. Some put in 30 bills in one session. Some people don't put any in. But there's no limit. So, and the only thing in the House we have a rule that if a bill is submitted timely, it must have a public hearing. And we have public hearings every afternoon, and it goes until all the people who comment had an opportunity to speak. Sometimes only for a couple minutes, but everybody who shows up gets to weigh in on it. And then after that, we have to go and figure out, after we've heard all of that, what we're going to do with those bills. And some things don't get through, and some things do. And some things take longer than a year or 2, and some things because the moment is right, because everything lines up and it's an issue that there's clarity about it. All of a sudden, people can see what some people have seen all along. Senator Tinsky's been a pioneer on a lot of issues for many years, and he usually sees things first, and we all catch up later. But that seems to be the process, and I'm not sure how we improve it, but I'm open to it. We have a system, and it seems to work, but I've been there a long time, so maybe I'm stuck with it.
Well, I was basically saying, after the past
First reader.
yeah, after passing the committees, it brings the floor.
Second reader.
All right.
I'll answer the question. I'll answer the question directly. And you know, Senator Pinsky is almighty, and he sees things before we see it. But some of us actually do research and actually find out what's happening. What I will say is that you know, on second reader, the Speaker of the House has the power to set the agenda, to say, okay, you know, this could come out, this can't come out, it can go to third reader. He has the ability to not put it on the agenda. They control the agenda. There's no way for us as a body to even pull the bill up, even if we wanted to, because they control the agenda. Even in the Senate, it's the same way, except I think the senator, the presiding officer there, he actually kills bills himself sometimes on the floor. He recently killed a bill that had to do something with some other countries might come in and might want to see how our elections process works, so they can then go back to their country and mimic our elections process. We do that typically a lot of times, to go to other people's countries to review what they do and actually take the best practices around the world and bring it back. He decided, because in the climate that we're in, we shouldn't have anyone come in and review our elections and see our elections and then possibly end up, you know, doing harm to our elections. So he decided to get on the floor himself and actually kill the bill. So there's so many different ways that these two presiding officers have power to stop a bill or move a bill forward. So it's totally up to them, in my opinion, and that's what I've seen.
Okay, I'm just doing my Phil Donahue impression. My hair's not white yet. By the way, before we forget, I want to acknowledge the work of William Murray and Greenbelt Access Television. They've been here many times, and it helps to get the word out about our club and about the issues that we're addressing.
So this is about health care and insurance in the state of Maryland. And I want any one of you who has a better understanding of this than me, which wouldn't take much, to explain what has happened. I think there are 250-some thousand people in Maryland that get their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act, but the Trump administration did away with the mandate. So there have been a couple articles in the Post on this, which I tried to understand and couldn't. So what has the state done to try to prop up the health insurance market in Maryland for people who are limited to getting health insurance through the Affordable Care Act?
Senator Alonso?
Oh, no. I know my lane. Well, actually, finance committee. You're absolutely right. The current president has done everything he can to undermine Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. Last year, during the sign-up period, he cut the time by half. He reduced the number of staff people to help. He cut advertising. He did everything he could. And actually, even in spite of that, the number of people who signed up in Maryland almost was equal to the previous year, and across the nation, actually. So people signed up in spite of all these obstacles. But the newest obstacle
Is the premium going up?
Requiring having the insurance. Obviously, took that off in the tax bill of the past year. And it's had difficult consequences. Where we had a number of insurance providers in the state, we're essentially down to 2. So the legislature took a couple short-term steps, band-aids, if you will, to try to stabilize it. So we had to put some money as sort of almost like a reinsurance to prop up, so one of the last 2 insurance companies wouldn't leave. It's a short-term fix, it's not a permanent fix. So a couple of other steps were taken. But if this program bleeds much more, it's in jeopardy. I'm going to be very frank with you. As much as I supported it, everyone here supported it, it will be in jeopardy. And that's in our state. We had a pretty sizable sign-up. We expanded Medicaid and did a number of things to increase the numbers. And I can't remember how many it was, but I think between private insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, and the exchange, close to 85% of the people in the state had some type of insurance. Still 15% without, which was a major problem, and we had more than other states. And I think this goes to the point I was making earlier. You know, the Affordable Care Act, I think, reduced by half the number of uninsured. Major step. And there were attacks on it in the last 2 years. Obviously, some people have been fighting for 5 or 6 years. And as much as we want to keep a program and keep people insured, the foundation of Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, is shaky because of things like our current president doing that. So we have to get to a point, I believe, where we have a system in place that can't be destroyed. You know, in Canada, and I'm going to use that as an example, it started in one province, in Saskatchewan, where they made sure everyone in the province got health care. They had one tax, they had health care for all, they cut out the insurance companies, they negotiated with the pharmaceutical company and said, if you want to sell drugs, you're going to do this price, not at this price. And then it spread to the next province, and the next province, and the next province. And now if you talk to people in Canada, despite what you hear on Fox, radio, and TV, anybody in Canada will say, if you try to take that away, I'm going to fight you. They all believe in it, they rely on it. It's why some of the Republicans shy away from attacking Medicare. Some are still willing to attack Medicare, but some are afraid. They say it's a third rail, they'll get defeated because people rely on it. And we have to get to a point that we have that kind of health care for everyone in the United States. And until we do, we're going to continue to have these crises. And, you know, I think we all felt pretty comfortable after it passed. There was great sign up. And then the next president starts tearing it down. And I didn't think it would have this much effect, but it has. So the legislature took a couple short-term steps. I'm not sure what happened next year or the year after.
Of course, the other thing that's been happening today has been really the attack of Planned Parenthood. And so it was like, well, we'll continue to provide funding, but you can't have any abortions. I'm going to get Jerry first, and then I'll get Jay.
So I'm happy that Senator Pinsky and Delegate Washington are on the Kerwin Commission. I did provide them with 6 simple ways to improve education in Maryland. I hope we follow up on that. So I'm wearing my Save Prince George's County public school pin, and I'm quite concerned about it. And there was an independent audit which basically concluded that the school system has a culture of non-compliance with regulations. Right? It's non-compliance. In Baltimore County, the superintendent has been sentenced, I think he's been sentenced to jail. And so I went before Senator Pinsky's committee, and I testified in favor of the Investigator General bill in order to have an Investigator General for all the school systems in the state, not just Prince George's County. And I was joined by parents and school board members, not only from Baltimore County, but also from Montgomery County and Howard County and Baltimore City. So I think if we want to have a good school system, at the very least we need a culture of compliance with regulations. And we need, unfortunately, we need an Inspector General for the state, for all the school systems in the state. And I'm curious as to what happened with that bill. Well, bills, it's also in the House.
Thank you for the question, Mr. One Person. I don't see the hat today. But I just want to thank you all. Thank you for that question. As many of you know, for years I've been working on this issue of creating an Inspector General for our school system. This Inspector General would review our finances and our systems and ensure that there's compliance, as Mr. Dances said, And it's not, we wouldn't be the first state or the first county in the nation to do it. Actually, Montgomery County is implementing one currently. Of the top 10 school jurisdictions in the country, 6 of them have an inspector general for their school systems. We're number 21 in Prince George's County, the top largest school jurisdictions. Both bodies of the Senate and the House both passed inspector generals for our Park and Planning Commission and the WSSC Commission. And both those agencies combined do not equal the employee staff that we have in Prince George's County Public Schools, or nor the budget that they have in Prince George's County Public School System. So it doesn't make sense to me why we couldn't pass or enact a piece of legislation that would create an inspector general to save money for our schools. Montgomery County is doing this because they created one for their county government, and then they saw the cost savings that they had when they started implementing it. And so they said, well, why not do it for our school system? Because we can then save money for our school system and then put that money back into the classroom. And so they're taking the step because they've already studied it and figured out that it's working. So I mimicked a bill that would actually do the same thing that their Inspector General has been doing. And actually for years I've been working with this Inspector General in Montgomery County to craft our bill and make sure that it's actually workable. And he approved it. This year, the governor decided to steal my idea and create a statewide one. I believe in local control, so I think that we could have done it ourselves for each local jurisdiction for all 24 localities or local school boards. But you know, in Prince George's County, we actually passed it unanimously from our delegation, and then unanimously out of the House. And it was a floor debate on this because so many different other delegates from other areas wanted the same thing for their county. And you can see it at Delegate Haley and Delegate Gaines, both were there, where they were just adding amendments, trying to make it statewide or make it for their local jurisdiction. This is Republicans and Democrats trying to do this. And so we sent the bill over to the Senate, and unfortunately, we didn't get a hearing. I mean, we got a hearing. I did the hearing for our local bill in front of Senator Pinsky's committee, and I listed about 20 different infractions of Prince George's County Public School System to the committee about why this is important. And unfortunately, that bill didn't pass, and I'll allow Senator Pinsky to speak on that. But that's what happened for this Inspector General bill, and I do plan on proposing it again next year if I'm happen to be reelected after this meeting. Thank you.
First of all, on behalf of all the municipalities, I guess the counties too, thank you for your support of the resolution of the user funds, at least for the time being, because it's something that we can now plan on for the next, this year we already know the supplemental, and then the following 5 years. Greenbelt also wants to thank you for the bond money that you found for us. I know it's very hard to find the bond money, but we needed it. I also want to thank you as a delegation and also with the Bowie colleagues that you tried through at least 6 different variations of trying to somehow control the Maglev's situation. It didn't go anywhere, but I do appreciate that. Now, one thing that the industry wanted was a small cell tower bill. It got pulled because they realized that something wasn't quite right with their bill because the municipality